This presentation is part of a workshop voicing indigenous food sovereignty struggles, which has been organized by the project Indigenous Food Systems in Transition, financed by Future Food at the Swedish University for Agricultural Sciences. Furthermore, the workshop was organized in collaboration with Case Study 18 of the Horizon 2020 Finance project Just North. You are welcome to listen to the lecture.
Now it's time for another interesting presenter. It's Per Sandström, Associate Professor at the Swedish University of Agricultural Science in Umeå, Umeå. And he will present for us from forest via light chain to reindeer products, an industrial, ecological, and socio-cultural food web. Welcome, Per. And I will remind you when 2 minutes is left of your presentation.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everybody. Exciting to be here. Thanks for inviting me all the way down to Uppsala. So I sit in Umeå, as Lena Maria said, and I have worked for the last more than 20 years on issues related to land use and reindeer husbandry, and always very closely with the reindeer herders. So they are very much part of this presentation that will cover many projects instead of one project. Let's see here, how do I switch picture? Nothing happens there.
I suggest you just rör lite på den här pilen så brukar det gå i bilden och försök igen.
Well, oops, there it happened. Okay. So I will talk then. This fits quite well with Birgitta's talk, and I think it keeps fitting in with what Anna Skarin will talk about later. So I will move along this different kind of food chain that spans from what the reindeer eat to reindeer being eaten. And I will be very early on not as early as Birgitta on the food chain, but I will look at the wild food growing, and the focus will be on lichen, the winter food. So we heard yesterday that increasing, I have to move these people around, I see, they're covering what I'm feeding. Increasing exploitations of natural resources creates diverse challenges for maintaining indigenous food systems. And zooming in from that question, I will start to address, can we both maximize wood and fiber production, forest industry activities, and maintaining and improve reindeer grazing areas, and focus then will be on winter grazing areas. So this will draw from a whole series of projects, some of them being 20 years old and some of them being new. And in some way, all these projects have something to do with the forest. So the main part of this talk will focus on understanding the impacts of forest activities, and also developing and propose, from knowing about the impacts of forestry, how can we develop and propose reindeer adjusted forestry methods. Then we have a series of other projects that relates into this, broadening the view of industrial impacts. How does mining affect? How does wind power affect? How does infrastructure affect? And these mining and wind power projects are, of course, of interest and related to this, because in the Swedish context, they all happen in the forest. So you forget about wind power and mining being a forest activity, but in Sweden, they all end up there. So the last two bullet points here, of course, when you look at forestry activities, you also have to look at the cumulative impacts of everything. And the lowest line here is that all these projects over 20 years kind of the backbone of them comes from this reindeer husbandry planning effort, Renbruksplan in Swedish, that's been ongoing for 21 years now. So quickly, we zoom in to you see Sápmi on the left map, and zooming into the reindeer husbandry area in Sweden, the dark green areas is all where the reindeer are all year, and the lighter green areas is where reindeer are in the winter. So the whole reindeer husbandry area of Sweden covers more than half of the country and covers almost all of the mountain areas. And also it always coincides with the productive forest lands of Sweden, which is a major important industry for Sweden. So you could say that the issues I will talk about here with lichen and forestry apply to half of Sweden, and all of the reindeer are walking around in these industrial productive forest lands. So half of the productive forest area is in Sweden is within the reindeer husbandry area. And zooming in even more, then you all know now that the white stuff that two reindeer herders in Tåssåsen sits in the middle of is lichen, and it is the key winter food for reindeer, as Birgitta said. It's there to maintain muscle more than to build muscle. The muscles you build in the summer, and then you maintain, the reindeer maintains its body during the winter and gets energy from the lichen. So forests and forestry and winter grazing areas, in a general sense, we can look at the trees are there to create important microclimates for the ground lichen. Older trees are needed because that's where the hanging lichen, the pendulous lichen, are sitting, hanging. All trees also, sometimes forgotten, contributes to important variation in snow cover, because there is variation in tree cover, you get variation in snow cover, and variation in snow cover is very important for the reindeer to find some place to dig for this lichen, because there is usually, you eat lichen that's under the snow. And on the other hand, then, too many trees makes it too dark on the ground, which is bad for ground lichen. Ground lichen need the light to be able to compete with the other things that grow on the ground. Too few trees give too much light and too dry conditions to start with, but it also often contributes to difficult snow conditions, and the snow conditions are too much the same, because there is no variation in tree cover. So from this, you see then that forestry is very important in determining the conditions, both for lichen growth, if they can grow on a place, and availability. And availability then is limited by snow cover. So I'm gonna see if I can start this now, moving. I hope this works for all of you that are out. This is a drone image. We're gonna fly. I hope it works for you. We're flying at about 40 meters and looking down, you see the treetops, and you see the white on the ground is lichen. And here the forest is quite dense, so there isn't that much lichen. And as we keep flying, we will see more white. I hope this works for you that don't have perfect connection. It works on my screen. Now we're coming out in a forest that has less trees, and you see more of the lichen on the ground, better light conditions. Here this is the kind of forestry we would want. And then we keep flying, and then we come out to a recent clear cut that's been soil scarified. And so the trees are gone, And on top of that, to make it good for the new trees to grow, forest industry have scarified the ground, and as quoting a reindeer herder I was out with only a few weeks ago said, they could as well pave this. There is no grazing in this area, and at the horizon there you see also a clear cut, but not, if you look over here, it wasn't scarified. So you really got to see the gradient from forests of different density with different conditions for lichen, the area that could as well be paved, and the cut area, but it wasn't scarified. So we, of course, then want to resolve this. We want to know, so we have used, in a number of studies, we have documented the status of the lichen resource. I will show some slides on that. And we also want to understand the reasons for this. It was quite obvious in this flight that forestry had a major impact. We also need to map the resources to be able to know where we should propose solutions. And the very last slide, I will show the consequences and then the positive consequences of considerations. So first, we look at, this is for the whole reindeer husbandry area, looking at since 1955, when the National Forest Inventory started, the inventory that looks the same today. There was, you could actually convert this to percentages. 14% of the Swedish forest area had lots of, were lichen rich. And today, at the end of this axis, we have less than 4%. There's a 71% decline of the best lichen forests over the last 70 years, which coincides with the time of when modern forestry methods have been used. So now we will look at mapping of lichen. Here we are flying over an area with a satellite looking down in Malå Sameby. This blue stuff is pine forest with lichen, and we have done a classification of lichen using field data and satellite data. And this blue stuff that's turned on, I'm blinking the blue stuff, is very lichen-rich areas. And then we have many, many years of GPS data. So reindeer are now verifying, is this blue stuff, is it good for reindeer? So now we're going to see lots of reindeer positions. And it's quite striking how well all these colors are many reindeers for many years leaving their positions. And you can look even at this little island of blue of lichen here. Even that place were visited by reindeer. So we know that we have a pretty good lichen map, and we know that reindeer like lichen. We have also mapped in light blue, we mapped where was it lichen in 1986, which coincides with the first satellite flight, the first Landsat images. So in light blue is where there was lichen in 1986, and that has shrunk to the dark blue areas, which is where we have lichen today. This is of course very important when you want to play consideration for reindeer husbandry. So we have listed
2 minutes left.
2 minutes, thank you. We have listed a number of efforts that the forest industry could do. We know we're dependent on the forest industry to improve lichen conditions. So here is a quick list. We want gentler and smart soil scarification. You saw example in the drone flight, non-gentle soil scarification. We want to thin, we want to take out, have fewer trees, which is not in contrast with what the forest industry want to do in young stands, we want to have fewer trees. In middle-aged stands, we want to have fewer trees, which is also in agreement with the practical forest industry, but it's not happening enough. We want to eliminate, according to reindeer herders, or reduce Pinus contorta, which is an exotic tree species that is bad for reindeer and for lichen in many ways. We want to reduce the number of plants you start a stand with. We want to have fewer plants at the early stages, and we want to remove logging debris, and we also want to have more continuous cover forest practices, which is good for pendulous lichen. So when we apply this is the last
It's the
slide.
last one. Yeah, good.
We want to apply that kind of, you saw a recipe of considerations, and we can look here. The lowest curve here is business as usual. So we look for the next 100 years. From today, we're here, and for the next 100 years, if we do business as usual, lichen will continue, and if we pay different degrees of attention, reindeer adjusted forestry, we can double the lichen areas, and then we can also calculate what happens to the cost. What's the cost for the timber industry? Little bit sped up in the end, but thank you.